Sound is a priority. No shit, right? It's an audio product, so of course sound is a priority in something like the Twistura D Major. It's a $50 or 3,000 peso single dynamic driver IEM that follows a brighter treble focused sound with like the addition of a sub-bass extension. It's an IEM to provide the D Major core characteristics of being fun, but most importantly, bright. And that's what they are. Just like the D major chord, which can be like played at a higher or a lower octave, you get the black, blue, and red tuning nozzles provided out of the box that gives just that. Starting with the default one, the black tuning nozzle provides a more like in-between type of sound where it has that characteristic bright sound of the D major chord without too much of the oomph or the body. What this essentially translates to is that female vocals and the rest of the upper mid-range to be forward, where artists just like Adele in the chorus of Say Hello instantly capture that goosebumps-inducing highs that make them sound exponentially enjoyable. However, this is not always a good thing. Songs like Iris by Goo Goo Dolls have like a good mix of bass, mids, and treble, but because of the way the black tuning nozzle affects said tuning, the vocals get overshadowed by the bass line and the acoustic guitar, making it sound like a U-shape where the vocals are, well, jaded. This also translates potentially into a lot of songs just like Basket Case by Green Day that sounds potentially messy and like borderline irritating because everything just sounds brighter and a lot more tiring or fatiguing to listen to. Then once we go to the blue nozzle, it's amazing for orchestra pieces like Summer by Joe Hisaishi, where the piece leans more towards like the airy sound that an IEM can provide, which gives them that nostalgia-inducing characteristics, which works well with the forward upper mids to air tuning, but it's a bit too forward for my liking when it came to songs with vocals where S's, shizzes, and chiz are present because consonants just sound sibilant and even borderline ear-piercing. Well, not even borderline, they are ear-piercing. And so, thank God they thought about including the red nozzle because otherwise it would have been too much. The red nozzle tuning bumps up the bass regions all while taming the treble a bit, which ties everything up to a bright-leaning V-shaped tuning where I'd say that it still has that high perceived level of detail because, well, treble is still forward, but it sounds so much more controlled and fuller with the oomph now that the bass is emphasized a bit more, which then makes all the songs that I just referenced to sound a lot more balanced, meaning nothing's inherently going to be bassy per se, but they're no longer going to be lacking in that regard. Then when it comes to overall technicalities with like the black and the red tuning nozzles from soundstage, imaging, speed, separation, and detail retrieval, they're all punching above its price range despite being a quote-unquote older release. It's an IEM, so it moves fast, especially in the $50 range, where I'd say that these are just a tad bit below the true Hexa across the board, as these are more or less like the same oblong soundstage, meaning that things from a horizontal plane and a horizontal manner sounds properly distant or close relative to what you're listening to, but everything starts to come closer as sound cues and like instruments in general move up and down the vertical plane. Imaging is also not wall hacks per se, but I'm perfectly capable of performing extremely well in tac shooters just like Valorant, plus these percent movements in songs like Dreams by Isabel in a manner that's not just left and right, but it's also going to be the front, back, top, below, and all around. Then when it comes to speed, these don't really have any sort of like bass smearing because they actually kind of lack it in a lot of cases, except for the red ones, where even in the red nozzles, everything sounds just as clean as the true Hexa, a bit below, even in regard to like separation and detail retrieval, where there's a highly likely chance that you'll be able to hear something relatively new in an old song that you've been listening to when using these. It's not gonna be as potentially revealing as the Hexa, but is gonna be there. Not to mention, these really makes releases just like the True to Hexa, the Clean Air Daybreaks, and even something like Ziget Lush look bad with their accessories despite costing only $50 US. How? Well, if we're talking value in relation to like sort of the sound, you have to hear the thing. You have to hear this thing. And to hear anything, you must connect things like IEMs to a source, like say your phone or your laptop. So unless both those things have an audio jack, in which case phones really don't have any, you're gonna be needing to buy a separate dongle DAC. And if you're a beginner, you might be confused about the options, but not with this one, because it literally comes with it inside of the box, all while having 3 sets of decent liquid silicone ear tips, 3 sets of regular silicone ear tips, and it even comes with a full leather case, which isn't so often found for IEMs, even on this price range, believe it or not. In addition to all that, the IEMs itself are made of aluminum from the housing onwards to the nozzle, making them potentially good for anyone that just wants to have a buy once get everything experience, since this also plays well with EQ. However, sound being the most important aspect doesn't mean that sound is going to be everything, and a good set of accessories or build isn't the only distinguishing factor that I actually look for in the cutthroat market of sub $50 IEMs, where there's also so much to cover that legitimate stores like Hi Fisher are a godsend for sending IEMs like the Twistura D Major, because I can review IEMs with absolutely no cost on my end in terms of money and integrity, since these were sent to me for free and they also value transparency just like me, as proven by this email snippet right here. Where despite the good tuning, good technicals, and let's be honest, amazing accessories that these have plus build, I experienced two specific issues that absolutely broke my experience. The obvious one is comfort and shape, which is a common issue. I'm not going to include the build since these are, again, built pretty well, but the finishing, though looks great, are an absolute fingerprint magnet. They scratch as soon as you breathe on them, and they dent just as easily. Then the nozzle lacks any sort of real extension at 5.3 millimeters around that area, where I physically can't push this in deep enough to get a secure fit, because even if I use the Sankai or the Duno SNS tips, which are longer than the short ear tips that these have, my ears just hit the black part, which prevents these from going in any further and giving me a proper comfortable fit. Then on top of that, in terms of the comfort, the lip diameter is also at a wide 6 millimeters, and they're back heavy, so they tilt. Matter of fact, they're actually too heavy in general at 11.5 grams per earpiece, which is a weight that you can definitely feel in your ears, especially in prolonged use. Not to mention, although the cables itself aren't tangle prone and are similar actually to the cable housing found in the Lecture D02's cable, the mic housing plus the buttons fell apart after a good 2 days, which probably happened during my commute, but what the hell. I just used it under normal circumstances, which is actually a bummer since the mic is actually pretty decent. Here, have a listen. Hello? Twistura D Major inline mic while indoors, so this is without any fans going on and such. And once we turn something on, it's actually pretty decent given the fact that it's just an inline mic, but it gets easily broken, so the microphone can kind of get close, just like this one. Then to add to that, I don't know if this is just a concern with my specific unit, but despite the 22 ohm impedance with the supposedly efficient 108 decibel sensitivity rating that these have, I had to set a minimum hardware volume level of 14% while indoors, by the way, just to get them to a comfortable volume on my tier N Black Pearl, the Catalyx 5K, Catalyx T71, J Kali GM6 Pro, and even the included DAC, which is actually going to be the worst offender of the bunch since it doesn't have a dedicated app, which means that I had to go all the way up to 20% hardware volume, still indoors by the way, which is not bad until you consider that the maximum volume for heavy music is at 32%. And what that essentially means are two things. Number one, there's gonna be little headroom to use when commuting in terms of volume, plus the DAC these have, though not completely useless, is too underpowered as I needed to go into high gain mode on my T71 with plus 8 millivolts just to make them sound close to my usual listening volumes, which is by the way, is an output that the included DAC with the CX31993 chip simply cannot provide. And it's truly just a bummer because this really isn't a bad product. The sound is literally in line with my preference. The accessories blow anything, even more expensive stuff, out of the water. And the technical performance is good, as well as the build is also really good. But with the way things are for me and a lot of people, comfort is a decently huge issue. Then on top of that, there's the fair bit of QC issues, at least I experienced on my end. Despite all of the potential probable issues, however, I'm still going to rate these at a B- tier since the quality control problems I have might be an isolated issue, which is something that I actually didn't see from a lot of people's reviews. So these might still be a great value IEM, assuming that it fits. But subjectively, I rate them at a C tier, and I'm sad to say that I can't recommend this to anyone easily, as there's a lot of potential issues that are too unorthodox, like say the shape and the comfort, that I simply can't confidently and comfortably describe in such a way that's going to be absolutely useful to you, which is actually really disappointing because this could have been a one-stop shop for beginners who want a detailed sounding earphone at a relatively speaking affordable price. But alas, That's been the Twistura D Major. Thank you, Fisher. Make sure to subscribe and goodbye.